So stick your hands up. But if you want to chat amongst yourselves about other stuff in the chat box, please feel free to do that. And that's it from me. Thank you for now.
Super. Thank you very much, Rupal. So we're going to go straight into our expert guest presentation. And Lynette, qualified clinical psychologist, working in the area of physical health department within Leicester. So a lot of what Lynette's going to talk about is happening in Leicestershire, and Lynette will be delivering one really good piece of news that's very applicable to those being treated in the Leicestershire area. But we hope there'll be a broader impact of that, where people living in other areas may be able to pursue similar access that Lynette's going to talk about. So Lynette, I'm going to hand over to you. Thanks very much for coming here today and sharing the time and your knowledge. And I'm going to ask you if you can try and share your screen with your deck, and it will be over to you. So thanks very much.
We'll get it.
This is where the technology kicks in.
And I think just there are one or two people still not muted. So if you could please mute yourselves whilst the presentation is on, that would be great. Thank you.
Super.
Okay, so shall I get started?
Yeah, over to you.
Okay, so can you see the presentation?
Yeah, now we see it fine.
Yeah.
That's lovely.
Okay, so thanks ever so much, Kevin, for inviting me to speak and come and talk to everybody. So as he said, I am a clinical psychologist and I work for the Department of Medical Psychology over at the Leicester General Hospital. And I can't seem to move the presentation. Okay, and the aims for today are that we're going to introduce you to what's the role of clinical psychology when you've got a health condition, and the focus is understandably going to be on medical treatments and medical interventions that you may have for that balanced condition. But what about your emotional health? What about your psychological health and well-being? So I'm going to introduce you to some ideas, mainly focusing around the idea around adjustment and acceptance of a health problem. And then I'm going to introduce you to some other things and concepts that are just about how we move forward with acceptance and how we get to a place where we can adjust and live well with having a health condition. I just want to put a little reminder at the end there. It's just about looking after yourselves today, because I'm going to talk about a grief model. So if you've recently had a bereavement or experienced a loss, and I know we're talking on a day where obviously there's a big funeral taking place in the country. So just be aware of that in terms of what I talk about, and you may want to kind of prepare yourselves for that coming up, but I won't focus on it for too long. So hopefully it'll be okay. Just take care of yourselves. So again, so why clinical psychology? Well, understanding the impact of health conditions as long ago as in the 70s, there's this idea that actually we can't just concentrate on the biological part of a health condition. We need to understand the psycho and the social. So there's this idea about this biopsychosocial model. And it really is about understanding not just the medical aspects of a condition in isolation, but understanding how we think, what we feel about it, how we behave because we've got a health problem and because we might think in a certain way about it. And that all helps us to understand then our ways of coping. So how do we cope when we've got a health problem? And also the social part of it is about understanding the context of somebody's life. We don't just live in vacuums, do we? It's about our family situation, our community, our culture, our economic situation. All of those things, again, will impact on how we cope or manage our health problem. So clinical psychologists, such as myself, working in health settings, we aim to help people with host health conditions to understand their reaction to that illness, recognise and make sense of their feelings, help them to add to their ways of coping with those feelings, and hopefully help people to start to make positive changes to their lives and to the distress that they might be experiencing due to their health. And as well, we've got to do that within the context of that person's life as well. We've got to acknowledge the social aspects of it. So if we kind of think, I'm just going to put this like up there just to show you how many different ways a health condition can impact our lives. It's quite massive, isn't it? You know, think about it. And these are just naming a few. There's lots of different areas that a health problem can start impacting on. Could be relationships, our roles. So that means, you know, whether we're a mum, dad, daughter, sister, brother, neighbour, whatever those roles in our lives are that we hold dear and are really important to us. But it's also about our independence. Can we plan for the future? Do we have spontaneity in what we want to do with our lives? Do we have control? Control is the key thing in the whole entire thing of what I do with people. It's always about control and the level of control we feel we have over our lives. So that's so key and important. But there's lots of different ways that a health condition can impact on us. And with that then, if there's lots of different impacts of a health problem, we're going to then experience an emotional reaction, aren't we? We're only human after all. So that could be loss and grief, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in detail in a moment. But it could also be stress, worry, uncertainty, anxiety, panic, low mood, irritability, depression at the severe end of that, loss of pleasure, anger or resentment, poor motivation, feeling of helplessness. Could be relationship difficulties, a feeling of isolation, could be guilt, feeling dependent on others, being a burden to other people. And it could be then our self-esteem or confidence level. And as I said, coming back again, loss of control. So we can start to appreciate then that having a health problem can then start to impact and affect our emotional well-being. Along with that then, so if we're feeling that way and we've got all those feelings going on, we're going to start thinking in certain ways about that as well, aren't we? In the beginning stages, that might be about, well, why me? Why has this happened to me? And what will happen to me? What does this mean for me? And that's a really key question, because that's what I want to talk about with people in therapy. What does it mean for you to have this health condition? What's the impact for you personally in your life, in your situation? How will I cope? Worries and anxieties, how will I cope? I've let people down. And what did that doctor say again when we went to that clinic appointment? And I can't quite remember what was said. And how do I get better? And how long will this last? Common thoughts that you're going to experience if you come into contact with having a health problem. I want to just point out this kind of little bit of a distinction between kind of an acute condition and a chronic condition. As Kevin, I think, put in kind of the biog thing before this presentation, I work predominantly with people with chronic pain. So a lot of that work is about adjusting to a chronic health condition, having chronic pain. But we need to understand, even with balance conditions, you've got kind of an acute and a chronic kind of thing going on. So our previous experiences and belief in medicine becomes questioned when we might have a chronic or health condition, a long-term chronic health condition. Because we're very used to a straight linear journey from illness to recovery. We're used to having a problem, having a treatment and recovering. So it's a very acute model. When this doesn't happen or takes time to get better, it can have a significant impact on our lives, and we might start to get stuck because things haven't recovered. And we may struggle then emotionally to cope with ongoing ill health. And again, it's about this struggle with being out of control of our lives and our destiny, and something that we understandably take for granted when we're well. We don't question it, we don't think about that. It's only when that's taken away or questioned that we have difficulty with it. And I think, you know, having watched, I've been on your website and I've kind of watched Professor Ray's kind of presentation, and I hear that there's a lot of good treatments and interventions, and there's a lot of hope in balance conditions for recovery. And that came across very strongly in what he was saying about the different treatments that are available to you for different conditions.
I'm not doing that.
For some, it feels like, listening to that presentation, that might take time to get to that recovery stage. And he also talks about relapses. So relapses can also happen. And I guess different people will be at different stages of that recovery process. And as such, will be at different stages emotionally in their process of acceptance or adjustment. And there are places we can start to get stuck emotionally or psychologically, and then things that then might help us to move forward psychologically. And we may have done well with our physical recovery, but we might take longer to catch up emotionally. So actually we may have recovered quite well, but somehow our mind and our thoughts about our health haven't quite caught up with the page around that. And it might be that we need to help the emotional side to be in line with our physical recovery. So I don't know where you are in your kind of journey, whether you feel that actually I've had this for a long time, treatments aren't working for me, and you do feel that it's a chronic condition, or whether actually you're in a different phase. I don't know, everyone's going to be different. But I just wanted to highlight that difference between actually when things start to become chronic, it can add to our emotional distress. And factors that might then affect this idea around acceptance might be about how the health condition started itself. Did it start in a very traumatic way? Was there an incident that kind of just happened completely out of the blue? And then all of a sudden, wham, you've got a health problem that you didn't have previously. Were there a lot of changes or things happening at the time that you were diagnosed or you first experienced symptoms? Also affecting acceptance is this idea around symptoms severity and frequency. So if actually symptoms are pretty severe and the frequency of them is pretty often, then the magnitude of those losses or things that might be on hold while you're in that recovery phase may be quite difficult to kind of manage then, and it's going to affect our acceptance. We've got to also take into account those that we have around us. So people who might not have much social or emotional support from other people, and that's why this group is absolutely fantastic as an aside, because it's giving people that support. But if you don't have a lot of support around you, again, that can be quite difficult to manage then in terms of your own acceptance, if you haven't got people that you can talk to about it and how your experiences are affecting you. There's also a big thing, of course, around invisible illnesses. That's certainly true of kind of a lot of health conditions. It might not necessarily be that obvious. When I turned up on the screen today, everyone didn't look like they had a health problem. I couldn't pinpoint what that would be. It's not obvious, is it? It's an invisible illness, I would imagine, a lot of the time. So that can be quite difficult then, because people don't understand that. Well, what's wrong with you? You look well, you look all right. And that can be quite difficult to cope with when you feel like, well, I don't feel okay. And also the inconsistency. So sometimes people with health problems feel good, they're having a good day, and sometimes they're having a bad day. So others around you may struggle with that and struggle to understand that inconsistency. So they may struggle to sort of think, well, you were all right on Monday, now you're not okay to go out to the shop. Why is that? And people may struggle with that. If you have mental health conditions, so if your health problem occurred at a time when you were already experiencing, for example, long-term anxiety or long-term depression, then again, acceptance is going to be harder. And if you've got other stressful life events that were happening at the time that you experienced symptoms, and also your past response to stress. So if you struggle to kind of manage stress and then this has happened, then again, it's going to be harder for you to kind of move towards an acceptance. So this is a bit then about kind of the grief process, and you might think, well, grief, what's this got to do with a health problem? But of course, health conditions have an impact on our sense of self, and we're losing our sense of self, what makes you you and your identity. So the person that you like to be, the person before the illness, and we can have difficulty with change and adaptation to that. So what stages then might we go through emotionally when we experience any change or loss? So this is taken from kind of Kubler-Ross. So this is a stages of grief model. So this was about bereavement in the first place. So this actually goes back to 1969. 2014 is a more recent book around it. This is about grief. So we go through experiences when we've lost a person. We go through stages in our emotional response. So we go through shock, so struggling to accept what's happened. We might experience anger about the situation, about the loss, about losing that person. We might experience bargaining phase, so I'd do anything to get that person back. Then we might hit a depression, so find it difficult to cope with the loss of the person and struggling to kind of get on with life again, feeling very sad. And then there's an acceptance, so recognizing that person's gone, but we can still move forward, even though they're not part of our lives. So that's kind of quite a useful model then to start applying to health and thinking about our health condition. Because any change that we go through, we can start to apply these rules. So think about kind of divorce, moving house, you know, a big change, a new job even. We might go through these emotional changes as a consequence. So with thinking about health problem, you may well start to relate to some of these ideas. So you might have experienced shock and denial with your health. So it's not happening, I don't want to talk about it, I don't want to think about this and the change that's coming. You might feel quite angry. Why has this happened to me? What have I done? You might then experience bargaining. I'll do anything to get rid of this illness. And of course, then kind of that's where, you know, kind of you put a lot of hope and a lot of faith then in the medical world, don't you, to help you at that stage, I'm pretty sure. You might start to feel that life feels like it's over, like I can't move on with this. And then hopefully you move then towards an acceptance. So this has happened in my life. I might need to make some changes about how I do things, how I approach things, how I look after myself, but I can move forward. And then hopefully past that, you might experience some growth so that you might say, well, actually, I learned to look at things differently now. I value life in a different way. I've got a different set of understanding around what's important to me. So after this, you might kind of want to think about, you know, after this presentation, you might want to think about, well, what changes have you noticed in your life from having a balanced condition, and what losses might you have experienced as a result of changes to your health? And they might be questions you want to kind of sit and have some time to reflect on. And of course, some of you may well be screaming at me saying, well, you know, that's all very well, but acceptance, you don't just kind of reach the end and that's it, that's not life. And of course it isn't. So the idea around that kind of stage that we get to an acceptance and that's the end of it isn't quite true, is it? Because that's not really realistic. And certainly the people I work with would clearly argue with me, no, it's not a linear process. It's not kind of we get to the end and it's all done and dusted. So it might be more helpful to kind of see it more as this kind of curve idea. So you can see at the beginning stages there, we've got kind of denial, shock, fear, those experiences, those emotions are going on. Then we might experience anger, you can see bargaining, depression, so hitting that lull, hitting that low at the bottom, and then hopefully moving towards an acceptance and adjustment. And by seeing it as more of a curve, by seeing it more of a flexible arrangement, then we can kind of start to appreciate that actually people might be at different stages at different times. And I would always say to you that it doesn't mean that you just got to hit some golden point at the end and all's well. It's not like that. Life isn't like that. A relapse might set you into a different stage. So it's kind of always coming back to this, always be kind to yourself about where you are on this curve, but also where you might want to go to, but also if you're not at a place that, and if you have been previously, don't panic about that. That's normal. We shift around, we move around. Don't beat yourselves up about that. But again, you might find that a helpful kind of thing to reflect on for yourself about where you're at. What stage are you? Where are you at in the journey of it all? So yeah, so have that reflection. Where are you at with journey? I know journey's a bit cheesy, but it's kind of the only way to go for it. We'll call it a journey. So I want you to kind of appreciate that all those emotions, all those feelings are quite normal when you're having a big change in your lives. And health and ill health is one of those changes that counts for that. Okay, so it's quite normal to have those feelings. And fear, anxiety, anger, depression are all emotions, and they're not bad in themselves. They're part of our full range of emotions, aren't they? And particularly when thinking about fear, anxiety, and anger, they go back to our primitive reptilian brain. So we've got kind of that brain within us that we've inherited from all the different other animals that are before us. We've still got that reaction. We've still got that initial fear, anxiety. We still react in that way because we have that brain. And we can't change that. So we need to be compassionate towards ourselves for those feelings. It's not our fault that we have them. They're there for a reason. And often with fear, anxiety, they're there to kind of tell us that there's a threat to us. So it's quite important information. But it's about then learning to understand ourselves and what might help us to manage those difficult feelings as they arise. So remembering it's a curve, I've told you that, but you know, also think about it. You know, some of my clients say that they even move within those stages in one day. So they might be on that curve at different points in the same day even. So be aware of it. We're going to have differences and we're going to be at different places on different days. So it is about this general move towards acceptance. Setbacks are normal. That could be with your health in the sense of a relapse, or it could be other events or stresses that might not be within your control either. Think of what we're in at the moment. I was meant to come to the lovely Leicester racecourse for this presentation, but here we are, sat on Zoom, which I find very difficult to get into, as Kevin will tell you. We're in a pandemic. What thing, you know, what massive thing has taken a lot of our control away? So be aware of that. It happens, it's life. Allow yourself time to process those feelings. It's okay that it takes time. Don't beat yourself up about that, and be kind to yourself. And you may not experience all those stages. So you might be saying to me, well, no, I don't recognize this. I've moved through it quite quick. I don't understand that. So again, you might not experience all those stages, or you might spend longer at one stage than somewhere else. We're all different. And there's no magic wand. I'm not going to tell you, like, this is what you need to do to move through this curve. It's not as simple as that. I can't give you a magic wand to move quicker through it. You can't wake up one day and say, this is the day I'm going to accept how things are. It's not like that, but there are things that you can do to help. And that's looking at different parts of the cycle in terms of where you might be on it. So again, I think the presentation with Peter Ray was really helpful, because he also put a lot of emphasis around the importance of diagnosis and the importance of information about what's going on for you. So again, if you were in that denial shock, if you're at the beginning of that adjustment process, then it's about information on your condition that you're going to need. It's about information, a diagnosis, an understanding, and also ruling out other conditions that might be going on. So that's very, very important. So my work often in clinics is really helpful. If I'm sat in an MDT clinic and the person has just been given a diagnosis, that's brilliant from my point of view, because I know that they've got what they need to hear in terms of their understanding about their health and what's happening. And then I can come in and help them with that. I can help them to adjust to that. But you do need some information, and it's very difficult if you don't have it. And I'm appreciating with you, if you don't feel like you've got that and it is uncertain, then it's harder to adjust and accept. If you're at that kind of bottom of the curve, so that kind of depression very loosely there, it's not clinical depression, just could be anything from low mood to clinical depression, but depression part of the curve, it's about being listened to and being heard. And that might be that family and friends are quite useful at that point to help you to talk to, you know, have people to talk to. This group is an example of something that's supportive. It might be that you need professional intervention. So it might be that you need someone like myself, a clinical psychologist or therapist, counsellor, to talk to about how you're feeling. And then hopefully what's going to help you then move towards acceptance are things like strategies and tools. And that could be your practical strategies. So that's about physio, being active. It's about managing other health conditions that you have. It could be about exercise, dietary changes, depending on your condition. But it's also then about the psychological. And I'll give you a few tools, techniques today that you can go away and think about, because it's also about that. It's about tools and strategies. And also, we need to think about then acceptance in terms of if you feel like then you've adjusted and you're at that stage, then it's about, well, how do we prepare for flare-ups or relapses? I think you more term them, I think. But how do you prepare for relapses? How do you manage that if you have one of those? What you're going to do? What's your kind of flare-up plan? And always with self-compassion. For some people, they may find that the idea around acceptance is a hard word. So sometimes it's about language for people. So again, acceptance can imply an idea around giving up, giving in. People want to fight about what's happening to them and not resign themselves to being ill. And I get that, I understand that. Who wants to resign themselves to being ill? So we might lose motivation if we do. So if that's true for you and you feel like, I can't understand that idea around acceptance, why would I ever want to accept a health condition? Think about it as an adjustment then. Think about it psychologically as an adjustment. More helpful to think about, I'm trying to adjust to having ill health or a health condition. You might find that language better. And then there's this idea, you can follow the link at the end as a reference to an example of this, but this idea around this tug of war. So with health conditions, we sometimes talk about that we're in such a tug of war, trying to wrestle the condition and overcome it so much that we kind of put all our effort and energy into that rather than adjusting to and kind of accepting. So the idea being that if you're in that tussle all the time, trying to fight, overcome, beat it, then sometimes psychologically, it might be more helpful to say, well, I just need to let go of that rope. That's not what's going to help me. I need to just let go of that and kind of concentrate on the things that I can control and I can do something about. And that's where then we get this idea around primary and secondary suffering. So Birch and Penman, again, there's a reference to these things at the end of the presentation. So they talk about this idea around two forms of suffering. So we have a primary suffering. So that's everything about the symptoms of your health problem. But then we also have a secondary suffering around that. So then it's about our mind's reaction to that primary suffering. So to, you know, having distress about it, thoughts about it, unwanted emotions. It's all about their mind's reaction. So it's just important to kind of notice that what we need to think about sometimes is our secondary suffering. Actually, it's about this idea around the Serenity Creed. So working on what's within your control to change and what's not, and work on the things that you can do something about. It's important to think about those and have, and I think there's that saying, isn't there? You know, have the wisdom to kind of know the difference between what you can control and what you can do something about and what you can't. So again, why psychology is quite important and helpful is that it's focusing on something that you can actually do something about, and that's your emotional response. Just want to highlight about kind of experiences of the family as well. Let's not forget them. I could see there's multiple people sometimes on the screen when you logged in. So we need to appreciate that your family members, friends, whoever's in your life might also be having fears and might feel quite uncertain. They've got to process their reactions to their loved one's diagnosis, prognosis, treatment, and the changes that they might have noticed. They're going through their own adjustment curve, and you may not match each other at the same time. So you might be feeling like, I can't face the world, I'm not feeling great. And they might be in practical mode, let's do this strategy, let's try this, and it might not match, it might not match. Equally, the family member might be in kind of that denial phase where I can't cope with the changes that are happening, and they might unknowingly, or perhaps without really meaning to, they might place expectations then on you as they try and cling to that person you were before, and they might put expectations there because they want those same things from you. And again, that's not kind of blaming or being cruel there. It's just kind of how it happens, because that's the way it is if we're in that kind of phase. And also ways of coping then might become about being perhaps overprotective, because that might feel preferable to them feeling helpless. Because again, if you're out of control, they might feel out of control about knowing how to help and how to help you. I just want to then touch on this idea around kind of core beliefs and ideas about the world, ourselves and others. So we have these core beliefs, these rules for living that we like to kind of uphold, and the things that we like to do, and they're tied to our sense of identity, so how we believe we should be. And we might not be aware of them until they're challenged. So have a think, again, this is a reflection thing for you after this perhaps, is to think about, do you notice that you say to yourself, oh, I should do this, or I ought to, or I have to, or I must? If you notice yourself saying that kind of thing to yourself, then that might be linking into a kind of core belief that you hold. So, you know, I should be able to clean all the house might come from a feeling of a core belief around the importance of, you know, that you do all the chores and that you're a helpful person and that you get everything done but once. And that's kind of the way that you like to be and the way that you like to live. So then you have these shoulds, you part placing these expectations on ourselves for how we might want to then kind of be and what we might want to need to do. So notice them, because they might be leading you into unhelpful kind of behaviours. And having ill health problems can often test those long-held beliefs that we have about ourselves. So when we make changes to our life, so you might have had to make changes to how you manage your condition, different routines that take account of the health problem, that might kind of challenge then our old ways of thinking about ourselves, which might give rise to a conflict and could make it difficult to commit to what you need to do to live your life now and for the now. So again, for example, if slowing down or looking after yourself that you might need to do for your health might then feel, oh, that's lazy, that's selfish. If you pride yourself on, I'm a person that's busy, I like to help others, therefore the belief then that drives you is, I should be doing more, I need to help others. So you can see how things about us, the way that we like to be, can sometimes get tested by our health and ill health. So notice those and notice if you might be doing that. And there's this idea then that Owen talks about this nature of, we all have an ideal self, the person that we like to be, you know, the person that we like to portray to the world, and also the person that you've spent all your childhood and all your adulthood to where you are now trying to be. So, you know, those things are important. It's all central values and things that you hold dear. If we're away from that and we're more towards a hated self, we don't like ourselves very much, we don't feel like us, then that's a problem, and we start to have a discrepancy. And ill health can chuck us into that mode. So it can chuck us into that. So we start to feel like we're moving more towards that hated self, that version of ourselves that we don't want to be, don't like to be. So start to then think about, well, okay, what can help? What closes that gap? And what people try to often do is get back to their old self. I'll just be me again. I'll just strive and get back. And they'll do everything they can to close that gap and be their ideal self. But of course, then they might overdo it. Then they might end up in situations where they end up in a flare-up, relapse, whatever. And it doesn't work. It doesn't work. So it's more helpful, again, to think about these ideas around expectation and reality. Think about the reality of your situation right now and where you're at with your health and what's going on in your life. Think about that, and then think about the expectations you might be placing on yourself. And are they realistic? And that might be, are they realistic for now? And it might change. Hopefully your health will improve. I really hope that. So hopefully it might not be forever, but we need to make account of that, because we've got to be kind to ourselves and put reasonable expectations on what we can manage. And if you start to do that with your thinking and the psychology bit, then hopefully you might find that life gets a bit easier. And again, I'm not saying to you like, oh, just scrap the person that you were before, just scrap all that, forget it. That's, you know, you can't be that person again. Not going to work either, is it? You are you, important, you are you. That would be unrealistic of me to say that. What it's about is softening. We've got to soften our expectations on ourselves at times. If things, you know, if you recognize you're getting into a scenario and you keep doing it and you keep going into that same trap again and again, you keep doing something in a certain way, it's not paying off, you end up feeling worse, then notice what you're doing and notice the expectations that might be driving that. What is it that you're saying to yourself that pushes you to keep trying to do it? And soften. Think about a different way in your head of saying to yourself, well, you know, it's okay if I only do such and such. That's okay. So, yeah, think about these ideas around, you know, what's kind of how accurate is my view of any changes? So are you ignoring the positives that are going on in your life? Have you started to develop this thing called an internal critic? So I've put a link to this poison parrot idea. Do you have this parrot sat on your shoulder all the time telling you, you need to do this, you've got to do this, you're useless, you're rubbish, you're not, yeah, anything, you know. That is quite annoying. So start to shut the parrot up, and there's a worksheet on that and how to do that. And allow yourself to keep mourning for things that have gone for now, that might be temporary, and think about how you can overcome them. Now, we're changing all the time. Get into the kind of this kind of like frame of mind when you think about change. Think about kind of your iPhone. I'm terrible at technology, but I think it might be 12 now. It might be not iPhone 12. I don't know, probably more than that. Think about it. You might have liked version 6 of the iPhone. Might have been great, loved it, loved the way it functioned, but you have to move on, don't you? Because when you renew your contract every couple of years, they want you to have the latest version and you go with it. Even if it, oh, I like the size of that one and I like the way, gone. But the model of the iPhone is the same, isn't it? It's exactly the same. There's a patent on it. We can't copy it because it's theirs. It's their thing. It's Apple's. So notice that you are still you. Changes, things happen to us all the time, not only with our health, with other experiences in life. You know, I'm a mum, so I had kids, pretty different person to when I didn't have kids. We're making changes all the time in our lives. So bear in mind that you are still you. The things that make you you are still you. You're still there as that central core. Don't forget that we're experiencing change. Reality is we're never the same. Get stuck in the past though, and those old expectations, the old self is not going to help you. Try to stop comparing yourself to before an illness. Stop comparing. Not helpful. It's not going to help you. Explore instead with what you can do to move forward. And that's about new ways to achieve what's important to you. It's all about what we call the values. So I'm just looking at time. I'm all right. So values, really important. ACT, big therapy now. And actually for you know, some conditions, ACT, it was a third wave therapy, which means it's kind of newer than other therapies. But ACT is now big news in health and medical psychology. We use it a lot. It's important therapy because it's about how to live a valued life with a health problem. We become so focused on our problems, we lose sight of what matters to us. Our values guide us through life. They keep us on the right path. They keep us moving forwards. They're not goals, which is really, really critical, Because if you set a goal, you might set a goal that's totally unrealistic and might be driving you back to the old person that you were before. We've got to be careful about what goals we're setting, so we don't set goals in themselves. So, you know, I want to be able to, you know, run 10 miles again. We don't set that kind of thing. We set what's important to you about running. We go back and we look at the value. What is it about running that you love? How could you do that now then? How could you do it? In what way could you think about running? Is it running that you need, or do you just like being out in the fresh air? Is it the countryside that you like? Do you see? And then you might set a goal of, oh, well, actually, yeah, a little like mile walk, the beauty spot that I particularly like might be a really good idea. That's the goal. Don't set unrealistic goals, but do it then from your values. Think about it. So again, this is your homework to take away. Think about your values. What's important to you? Think about all the roles that you hold in your life. I've just put a few up here. I've put a little thing at the bottom. We might not be covering them all here. So any other value not covered, add it in. It's your thing. It's your thing. So think about your family, relationships, different roles that you hold, your leisure activities, your interests, your hobbies, religious, spiritual aspects of you, and start writing these values. The bullseye thing in the middle is quite important. What we want to try and do is think about the things that are important to you, what are your values, and then start to write them. So you say, well, okay, what's important to me right now, and how close to that bullseye am I in terms of meeting it? So think about kind of how close to the bullseye are you in meeting it? And I think kind of bully, it was on, wasn't it, with it was on ITV last week. It's like coming to my mind. Sorry, I'm getting distracted by my own thoughts. So it was on, wasn't it? Alan Carr revived it. So bullseye, think about it. Are you meeting those values, or are you way out? And then decide, well, which value do I want to work on then? What do I want to do? And then set your goal to move towards it, moving towards what you need to do. And again, there's a lot of talk about SMART goals. Occupational therapists love SMART goals, so they'll be all over that if you've got one of those in your lives. So think about SMART goals. There's a sheet again on the presentation about that. I'll give you an example. So if, in terms of parenting, you sit and write, so it doesn't have to be an exhaustive thing. This is a small thing, small sentence. What do you value about parenting? I value children being able to have fun and enjoyment. I want to be able to kind of, for them to come to me with their problems, and I want to have quality time. The importance of it is 10 out of 10. Being a mum, absolutely important to me. Am I meeting it though? Am I close to the bullseye? No, not really. I feel like I'm 5. I feel like I'm 5 out of 10. All right then, what's the goal then? What do you want to set to help you? Well, you know what? Actually spending a couple of hours on a Sunday, tech out the way, playing a board game would be great. Do you see? So it's a different way to kind of come at goals, a more realistic kind of way, because it's about where you're at today, where you're at now, rather than kind of harking back to an old self or whatever you could do previously. It's about focusing on now. And hopefully then those goals will change and the values will keep being there. They're a constant. And again, your values themselves might change. So I've put some other things then for you to kind of think about in terms of improving your quality of life, because it's all about what we can do to help. So think about balanced lifestyles. It's a really good idea. Think about kind of the balance that you've got between different aspects. So it talks about productivity, achievement, things that you might be doing for leisure, things that you might be doing for rest and looking after yourselves. And sometimes our balance can get out of line, out of whack. So we need to kind of think about what can we do to alter our lifestyle to nourishing and depleting tasks. Again, is another way. So there's a handout on this, another way of kind of thinking about the things that we do. Stop doing and putting all your energy into depleting tasks, like things like, well, I always say like ironing, because I hate ironing. That's my #1 depleting task. But you know, think about the things that you really hate. If you're just doing those all the time and focusing what energy you've got on depleting tasks, not going to be much fun, is it? Think about the things that nourish you. Got to have a balance in your lives. Don't put all your energy into depleting, draining tasks all the time. Relaxation and mindfulness, obviously psychologists, I'm going to mention those things. They are really important. They are really good, especially for anxiety and helping you to understand. So when mindfulness comes in, is helping you to appreciate what kind of is going on in your mind and that you don't have to run with it. So when you're kind of tuning in a bit more to kind of the thoughts that are going on, you don't have to run away with what the thought is telling you. It's learning that thoughts are just thoughts. They're not fact. They're just telling you something. Become an observer. And that's where mindfulness is really good for helping people to understand how to be an observer of their thoughts, allowing them to run past without emotionally jumping in and attaching to them and running with what they're saying. Really good technique, helping you to focus in that way. And relaxation, great. So if you've got sleep problems or anxiety, relaxation techniques are fab. And I've put on the end just some emotional kind of well-being websites, things that might be of use to you. Just in terms then of kind of role of clinical psychology. So we're here as a service. So our service at the General, it's about giving people that space to explore their emotions in relation to their health. It's about mood management, managing anxieties. It's about perhaps looking at your values and helping to move you forwards in some way. It might be about managing a trauma. So if you had a health-related trauma, it might be about that. Introducing you to relaxation and promoting those coping strategies. And referrals to us can come from your hospital consultants. So we don't accept GP referrals. They all come to us via UHL. So that's the hospital trust. So if you're open to any consultant or specialist nurse across Leicester hospitals, you can ask them to refer to us. So it doesn't have to be from Balance, but it can be. So for example, from the Balance Clinic, you can ask them to refer to us. But you must live in Leicester, Leicestershire, Rutland, or have a GP in that area. And we can't accept from GP because we're funded by UHL. And again, the difficulties must be arising from or contributing to your physical health. So we don't kind of work with other mental health issues. It's about your health and the impact that that's having. They're just kind of some caveats just about what might not be appropriate. So if you're receiving or waiting for any ongoing support somewhere else, or you're engaged in therapy somewhere else, that might not be appropriate for now. If you've got long-standing mental health difficulties that are the priority at the moment, again, you might not be for us now. Suicidal, so if you're feeling suicidal or require regular risk monitoring, you're not going to be right for us now. We don't have that. We're just a team of psychologists, so we don't have psychiatry or CPNs or anything of that nature. So we can't kind of look after your risk in that way. And it might be just not the right time to engage. I've just put on the end just some other ideas. If you think, well, I'm not open to a consultant in UHL, well, you can still talk to GP, get them to think about places that you could refer to. And the Let's Talk Wellbeing service has now been moved over to Vita Health Group. They're the new self-referral service, again, across Leicester, Leicestershire, Rutland. So again, if you wanted to self-refer yourself, you can do that. Okay, and I've just put on a crisis number there for people if they needed to access that. So managing the emotional impact then is about being gentle, being compassionate towards your experiences and what you're going through and what perhaps you need to do for now. And remember, it is a process, so setbacks will happen, and focus on what's important to you and what drives you, and that might help you move forwards. And again, those changes and adjustments that are necessary right now might not be permanent. So it's learning sometimes to live in the now and focus on what might help you now. And be kind, because you're all doing marvelously, and don't forget it. Okay. Thank you.
That's brilliant. Thank you.
Let's start sharing. Yeah.
There you go. Wow.
Sorry,
that was great, wasn't it?
I talked too fast. Sorry. Sorry.
Well, hopefully that's why we're recording this as well, and people can go back and watch it and pause, because there were many occasions during that, I think, Lynette, where I was like, wait, I need to write that down. Wait. So hopefully we'll have the, brilliant. Absolutely loved it. I don't know what other people thought. I see lots of smiley faces. I was nodding quite frantically at a lot of the stuff there. So this is your opportunity now to ask any questions to Lynette, and I think it's fantastic news as well that referrals can be made to the service. So rather than put them in the chat box, if you've got a question, stick your hand up and I will come to you?
Just before we start that, I just wanted to pick up on the referral side.
Yeah.
Until I spoke with Lynette, I had no idea that Lynette's department existed, and no idea that if you were being treated by the Balance Clinic in Leicester, it was as straightforward as asking for a referral. And why I'm making a big deal of this, over the last 2 years with many members, many of whom are based in Leicestershire, I don't think they've been aware of this service as well. And I understand, Lynette, that there's obviously going to be the normal NHS waiting times, and obviously you're there to ensure you're helping those who need the help. But all along the journey with our support group, I can only say that a huge second to the physical symptoms we all suffer with has been the impact on our mental well-being. And anxiety, loss of confidence, isolate, all those things kick in, especially where many of us have got chronic conditions. So one thing we're going to do now as a support group is use this information, and I'd encourage all the members to appreciate, if you think you can benefit from Lynette's department, you really want to get that referral. Lynette has said you can't be referred by your GP, but the GP can refer you to the Balance Clinic, where you could then get a referral. Something open for debate with others. My personal view on why has this slipped through the net? I think all of us, when we go to, say, the Balance Clinic, we've probably waited a long time to get there, and we're so keen to discuss our symptoms and try and find a solution. Can somebody help us from having these awful attacks? Can we start to get a balance back? We probably don't think it's appropriate to bring up the other side of the condition, where we're suffering with our whole life is disintegrating. And likewise, I suspect that the great people, for example, at Leicestershire Balance Clinic, they're so busy, so pushed trying to treat symptoms, they may not think it's appropriate to delve into the other side. So we'll do all we can to be in touch with the Balance Clinic and see whether more of that can be discussed with patients. But I would urge all your members, and hopefully people watching the video, even if you're outside of Leicestershire, find out if similar resources are available in your health trust. But I say, I honestly am amazed, and especially, Lynette, I think you'll confirm, you, for example, if you've got a chronic pain problem in Leicestershire, it's very, very common for a lot of patients to be referred to you.
Yeah. So we've got really kind of good links with the pain service, and they specifically fund kind of pain psychology time as well. So again, that's something that you can be thinking about as members in terms of consultants, and thinking about the need really, if you wanted more dedicated funding. But
no, I think honestly, my personal experience is that the anxiety soon kicks in with anyone with a balance problem, because as we all know here, everyone in attendance here knows how significant it is, and it just stops your life in its tracks. A lot of things resonated with me, where my personal journey started with an attack out of nowhere, and my life changed on that day. And the grieving process certainly again resonates. The only bright spot I saw out all of that, I've now decided that doing housework is now known as a depleting task.
Exactly. Forget it. Get out into the sunshine. But of course, you've got to be realistic. I'm not kind of clouding. I'm not, my head's not in the sky. I understand people have jobs, people have responsibilities. Obviously, I'm not kind of it's all wonderful, just forget it, because obviously that's not realistic, is it? But it's about balance. Think about your balance at times. That's what goes out the window, and we stop doing things that are fun and enjoyable.
Absolutely. absolutely. So I'm going to shut up now, Rupal, and let everyone ask their questions, because the bit I just wanted to bring up was the technical side about how we can seek this help.
Yeah.
And what amazes me is, again, it's just lack of information out there to the people that matter, that we can seek that help. I'll be doing all I can to broadcast that over the coming months. But now I think the more important bit, Rupal, is people's questions about how to help themselves.
Absolutely. Those I had the lady who has Alan Sample's name.
It's all right. My husband put his name on. It's
okay.
Ella.
Ella, did you have a question for Lynette?
Well, yes, it's connected with, you know, your physical health can impact on your mental health, really. And, you know, I have dragged my poor husband in to help me with the exercises, because even though I think I've been doing them properly, you know, they haven't been exactly spot on. So he says, well, you know, when you do your head, you've got to do this. So I think the physical side is important, and especially during this pandemic, you know, people's physical health has really gone downhill. Yeah. So I do as much physical as I can. And I do find that when I do the physical, it does help. You know, the emotional. And actually, strangely enough, I have had contact with Northampton University. Somebody is doing a project there. So it might be that, you know, if we can't get into you, Lynette, we could do both. Because his PhD is looking at the physical side of making the progress. So, and I certainly do think my emotional has been affected a lot, but it's other people's attitude towards me that's been affected.
Absolutely, yeah.
You mentioned that, didn't you, Lynette? Well, you talked about sort of the reaction of family and friends, and how people can be at different stages.
Yes. And I think it's trying to help us cope with those on the, you know, outside. I mean, for example, when I went for a jab, I sort of tripped on the big steep paving slab, and somebody actually came up to me and said to me, "Are you drunk?" So do you know what I mean? It's all that sort of stuff that happens. And you know, and also with my family, luckily I have got a fantastic husband. That has made such a big difference. But my family said, well, have you got Alzheimer's? Have you got something else? So I've had a real, what I'd call real difficulty, and therefore, because of them thinking I had all sorts of things, they were leaving me out of anything to do with family. And I am the eldest of 7.
So Ella, did you, I mean, have you found ways of kind of working with your, you know, expressing how you feel with family and friends as well that don't perhaps understand?
Well, yes, I'm afraid I just have to manage them as best I can. And I see the problem is not mine, it is theirs. So that's what I think. I think, well, and luckily it's my personality, because I'm so blinking upbeat, no matter what comes along, you know, I carry on, and I'm so upbeat about everything.
That's brilliant.
And I love making contact with the support group, because I chat to people. I mean, I talked to someone who was actually living on her own during this pandemic. And at least, you know, we could talk together. So this support group is like absolutely fantastic for me. And
Ella,
for people who are more quiet and withdrawn, it's not an easy thing.
Yeah. Ella, thank you so much for sharing that. And I think, you know, it kind of proves that, you know, we're all at different stages and you know, in our journey. Anybody else got a question? Or Lena, do you want see Lena's hand up?
Yeah, first of all, let me just say that was a good presentation. I've got a question because my memory doesn't serve me right here, but I used to go and see somebody there at the General. I don't know if it was psychiatry, liaison psychiatry.
Yeah.
And so is that totally different to what you do? Because from what I used to have done was basically a 5-minute appointment. You walk in, okay, how are you doing with your medication? I'm like, I don't really want to take my medication. Well, shall we up it or shall we lower it? And that's it. That's all they asked about. So I didn't feel I had the support. This was about 10 years ago. I don't think I've had the support since.
Yeah. So psychiatry is quite different in the sense of they are doctors that are there to look after your mental health from a medication point of view. So we don't prescribe medication. That's not what we do as psychologists. And yeah, I mean, we have, we do therapy with people. So we have 50-minute sessions to an hour at a time for people. So we're quite a different beast. You know, I think about it in terms of counselling, if that's an easier, you know, thing to kind of think about. You know, that's what we are. You know, we're helping people in that way. So it's completely different to psychiatry.
Yeah, because I am actually having some sort of counselling at the moment because obviously last year I lost my best friend, my great support, everything. So I've had some sort of counselling, but I don't find that counselling's helpful.
Okay.
And I was thinking I needed something in the psychology department, but are you just dealing with just like the balance conditions? Because yes, I have a balance condition and that affects me physically and mentally, as well as other knockbacks. I've had all the grief you can think of, everything you said on your presentation. It's like, you know, I'm at a rock bottom. I feel like I'm rock bottom. And I'm on my own as well, like the lovely lady there just said, you know, it's difficult with the pandemic. So I don't know. I mean, I see the balance therapist, so I don't know whether it's worth asking to be referred to you.
Yeah, do so. So I think, you know, coming back to the first slide, it's about biopsychosocial, isn't it? So, you know, these things, you know, sometimes exist at a time when we're actually at a low for other reasons as well. So as long as kind of the, you know, as I said, it has to be kind of about your health primarily. That's what they're there to kind of talk about. But obviously people don't live in a vacuum. There are other things that are happening in people's lives, and we appreciate that, and we'll work with you to see if we're the right service for you. You know, we do assessments with people as our first port of call, so we'll do an hour assessment with you to find out if we're the right service, basically. So we'll do that.
Thank you. Julie, did you have a question, Julie? You're still on mute, I think, Julie. Thanks, Lena.
Okay, right.
Okay, perfect.
I have many airs, and so sometimes I can go for a long time without anything happening, and then I might get a relapse, and it could be for a whole month. And it's, have you got any tips for what to do when you have one? Because I tend to go on a downward spiral. You know, I don't have one for ages, then it comes along and hits me like a bus, and I go down this spiral of, you know, I can't go out, I can't do anything, I can't drive, you know, I've lost my life yet again, and it's going to last a month. Have you got any tips for coping with that?
Oh yeah, so it's all about it's all about thoughts, isn't it? It's all about the way that you're thinking about things. One of the handouts on the presentation is about this idea around an emergency like self-soothe box. So it comes again from a mental health point of view, but it's great for physical health as well. I think what you need is like what we would call like a flare-up plan. So it's about thinking about the things that are going to help you get through those days or however long that might last for you. I don't know how long it lasts. How long do they last when you get one?
The actual attacks only last a few hours, but the feelings can be a whole month. It can take like out of your life, feel as though you've lost a month of your life.
Yeah, okay, yeah. So it's then having a toolkit of different things that then you can pull together that are going to help you to soothe you. So that could be kind of, you know, having like a favourite book in the box. It could be having kind of favourite music, favourite DVD, whatever it is that's going to help you to kind of cope with that period of time. Because it's about kind of recognizing that those setbacks might be happening, but it doesn't mean like you're back at square one, or it doesn't mean it's kind of all forgot, you know, all over. It's about recognizing, what do I need to do for now that's going to help me through this next few weeks? And it's about thinking about that idea. And also, I haven't included it, but I'll send it to you, Kevin, anyway. Yeah. Just kind of a handout around kind of challenging those negative beliefs, because what often happens is we get so caught up in our thoughts. So we start catastrophizing, we start mind reading, we start predicting the future, and it's learning to kind of catch those thoughts and then try to kind of gently challenge them and think about, well, how could I think differently? So again, I'll send those kind of resources or those links to those things, so you've got those.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah, but that can be really kind of useful at that time. And I would say, again, this is where relaxation can be a really helpful thing, because when we're kind of just stressed and we're at that level, we need something that's going to help us to kind of calm and to focus. So again, relaxation would be a good way forward for you, thinking about techniques for that.
Yeah, I think the thing is, when you then try your relaxation technique, yeah, they're not really working, because you feel so bad, you feel so rubbish, you know, you think going to have to go to the bathroom and vomit, you know, you're in that position where positive thought, I mean, I'm quite a positive person really, but at those moments they just abandon me, and I don't quite know how to get myself out of it or stop it, or
so I think it's having that switch in that mind frame to saying, well, you know, for now I've had that attack, I need to give myself a few days where this is what I've got to do to kind of look after myself. And it might be that you have to think about, again, it's those expectations, that you're not just going to kind of snap back and off you go afterwards. You need give yourself like that week, that this is my week then where I put my flare-up plan into place. These are the things I need to do to look after myself. And the box would be a good place to start, I think, because then it's sort of going, well, I've had my attack, now I do my flare-up plan and I put that in place. And it gives you that sense of control. It gives you that sense that I'm doing something positive about it, to manage it, rather than it feeling like, oh, that's it, you know, it's that mindset bit where you've got to kind of say, well, now I'm in flare-up plan, then flare-up, I'm in a flare-up, what do I do when I'm in a flare-up? And this is what I do, and sort of list the things that help you, because there must be things that kind of eventually kind of help pull you out of it. So it's recognizing and learning what those things are, and kind of having that plan, and also sharing that with family and friends around you. So once you've got an idea of the things that are going to help you, having that then visible, it's on the fridge, or, you know, or you give someone a job to do. When I'm feeling like this is what we've got to do, and get people to help you with it. Whatever you need from other people, if that's like when I'm in a flare up, I need someone to make the dinner that week, you know, whatever it is, it's having a connection with other people as well, so that you don't feel then that you're dealing with it on your own. Obviously, if you've got that to hand and you've got those people around you that can do that with you, but that can be a good way to bring them in to help you, because sometimes people can feel quite helpless when they don't know what to do.
Okay,
so
great.
Give them a job to do. Oh, can you do this for me? Yeah? Delegate.
Thank you, Julie. I hope that helps to some degree. I'm just conscious there are other people, and Polly has written quite a long message. So Polly, my sincere apologies if I'm not reading this correctly. I'll just read the top part of your paragraph. I totally agree that on a personal level, adapting to our situations, which can and do fluctuate both physically and emotionally, is very important. However, from the perspective of advocacy for people with long-term balance, motion, sensation symptoms, if we all adapt, then it feels a bit like saying to the next generation of patients, yes, it can take ages to get a diagnosis and access to evidence-based treatment. You know, are we giving up, basically? Are we compromising? I think, Polly, is what you're trying to ask. Yeah. Forgive me if that's not the case.
I appreciate that, and absolutely, you know, we've got to do both, haven't we? But I guess my focus is around kind of your well-being. And while those things, yeah, are absolutely right, I agree. Yeah, that's why these things are important. Like this group's important. It's important to keep kind of moving things forward. It's important that, like, you know, supermarkets now have toilet stickers that say these toilets might be used by people with invisible illnesses. Absolutely, those things are important, aren't they? But again, I'm here about your well-being, and it's about what you can do to manage for now while those bigger fights are happening. Because yeah, you're right. Yeah, keep going with those things.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Nigel Davis's iPad. Hello, I think you've got a question.
Well, yes, it's just about, I'm in Thailand. I live here at the
Oh.
moment. Well, my husband, who has Alzheimer's, he's in a care home here. So I only really came for 3 months. I come for 3 months, I go back to the UK for 3 months. But of course, with the pandemic, I've been here 17 months.
Wow.
So anyway, there's nothing here regarding balance treatment. I have investigated, and a few weeks ago I had a really bad spell. And I mean, living here, I don't know if you know Thailand, but you're crossing a road, nobody stops. So, I mean, it's very difficult. It's not an easy place to live, especially when you've got vertigo of any description. I just want to know, how do I get onto a support group? How do I go about that?
What, you mean from a medical psychology point of view?
Yes. Can I talk to anybody about that? You know, when I have a problem, there's nobody here to help. Is there anybody, how could I just go on a website and look for somebody in London, or?
But I think now with kind of the way that we are like connecting, there's going to be kind of sort of from a point of view of like private kind of help, if that's what you're saying, because actually,
yes,
you know, we're on Zoom now, so I think kind of private therapists are switching to Zoom.
yes.
But if you live
Right.
so you live in the UK though for some.
Well, yes, I normally have 3 months and 3 months. You see, I go back and
Where do you live?
forwards. In Yorkshire.
Yorkshire. So again,
near Harrogate.
So it might be again that you know, speak to your GP in Yorkshire, and they can, because we're doing at the moment, our service is all online. So we're doing telephone calls, we're doing, we've got a thing called Attend Anywhere. So we do like this, we're doing it online. So it might be that your GP in Yorkshire then can refer you to somebody that they probably have this technology right now, because we're in the pandemic. And because you're registered with your GP there, that's a good place perhaps to start.
Yes, they did send me for some counselling. Well, that was the biggest way. The counsellor had no idea anything to do with balance issues, nothing. And then I told my GP, he just said, oh, well, never mind. And that was the end of that. So it wasn't, I mean, a balance problem. I tried to explain what BPPV is, but do you know, even for some of the professionals, they don't know what I'm talking about.
Sadly.
Sadly,
Thank you. Susie, did Susie have a question? Thank you.
Thank you.
Susie Lambert, did you have a question? I think you had your hand raised. Go for it. Where are you? I've lost you on the screen now.
Can I just say, people, about the private stuff? So if you're looking for a private counsellor or therapist, then have a look on the BAPC website. So that's the British Association of Psychotherapists and Counsellors. And if you are, then, you know, you can kind of look for private therapists elsewhere, but make sure they are registered to the HCPC, which is the kind of governing body over kind of psychologists and therapists. So make sure they're good enough and have those qualifications.
Yes.
So many letters. So many letters.
I'll put that in an email.
Yeah, put it, or perhaps even in the chat box. Susie, where's Susie gone? I've lost Susie altogether. She was here a minute ago on my screen. Susie, brilliant. Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I think Lynette's actually just answered my question, because my question was going to be that the hospital that was treating me told me that I needed to see a psychologist.
Yeah.
And although they were based in the room next door to us, my postcode wasn't satisfactory to be treated by the psychologist, even though it was perfectly okay for the hospital. So I was going to ask you pretty much the same question, which is, for those of us that are not in the Leicestershire area, can we book in to see you privately, or with all those letters that you've just given us of what the criteria are to try and find someone that might be more local to us?
Yeah, so I would have a look on kind of the website. So I don't work privately myself,
Okay.
and I can't recommend, because I work in the NHS, so I can't like recommend a particular private counsellor or whatever. But I can put in. Should I put it in this chat thing? Or
Yeah, please.
Yeah.
Put it in the chat box.
Lynette, we'll put a lot of things on the website after this meeting anyway, so we'll put a lot of links at there.
Any other thoughts? Any other last minute comments before we wrap up? Anybody else? If I haven't seen you, my apologies. Just stick your hand up. It would be the quickest and easiest way.
Yeah. Very quick, because I've already had my quota of time. It's keeping your sense of humour and seeing things as funny. Because when I had one fall, the doctor was in the centre and he came out and he said, "Oh, hello, what's wrong with you?" You know. And I said, "I've got PPPPD, you know, and vestopathy." And he said, "Oh, what's that?" And he was a GP and he had no clue as to what was wrong with me. So Alan said, my husband said, "Look, stop telling people that you've got what you've got, because they don't understand." So it's extremely difficult. And, you know, when I started to have a bit of a flutter from people around, and the GP did come out. He was wearing full blue gowns and everything, and it caused such a flutter, you know, what's going on? And he said, "Look, I'll get the vaccination and I'll vaccinate you out here." So he did, and it was hilarious. And I think if you can see the funny side of events, you know, it does help.
Yeah, thank you for that.
I have a big thing about kind of humour and the use of humour in therapy. So I'm quite big on the use of humour, and it might not be everyone's kind of cup of tea or not, but I think you're right. We have to have that ability to kind of laugh at ourselves or see the humour in things at times. It is important. And what goes on sometimes with people is that they've lost their sense of humour. It's a good barometer for me when I meet people, that if you've kind of lost your sense of humour, then that might be a sign that things are difficult. So humour is very important, I'd say.
Rupal, I've just got a couple of questions myself before we finish. Lynette, you may say this doesn't exist, which would be a shame. Is there any way to identify and list all the other NHS trusts that offer the resources you offer in Leicestershire? Because we've got a lot of members scattered around the country. And I, for example, trying to find your department on the internet, really difficult. And it would be lovely to eventually get a list of authorities that offer this on the internet, because we have to understand there's an awful lot of our members that can't afford private consultation. And the number of times in the last 2 years I've been asked, "What do you do? How do you get help on the psychology side?" And we've never had an answer. So I'll probably pester you about that after the meeting and see if we can start listing resources. Another thing, which it's kind of a general comment, but I do worry it prevents a lot of people getting this care. Do you think there's still a stigma for a lot of people when we mention the word psychology? Whereas I liked it when you earlier mentioned see it as having counselling. My worry is, and I may be wrong, but I think the older generations, it's probably seen as a huge stigma that to use that word or say you're seeking that help, people worry that others are going to think, "Are you insane? Are you mad? Are you crazy?"
Yeah.
Is that a thing, or is that?
Yeah, it is a thing. So I sit in assessments with people and they like, "Oh, if I tell you this, you're not going to have like the men in white coats come and take me away." People will say that to me. People are very concerned about that. I think that's definitely true. Yes, I think people do kind of struggle with that idea that they're seeking help, and is that okay? you know, especially if they've coped with a lot of things in their lives before. If you're a coper and, you know, you really cope with lots of other adversity in your life, and then you find that you can't cope with this, then you might find that very difficult to own up to even. So yeah, absolutely. But I think the key point is that, you know, we're there to help, and we're there to help you with that part of your life, and it is really important.
Yeah.
So yeah, don't see that. Yeah, don't let that kind of stop you, and come along, try it. That's all you can ever do, is give it a go and see how you feel.
I'd urge everyone, members now and anyone in the future watching this video, if you've got the ability to get that referral and you recognise any of those conditions that Lynette spoke about today, I'd go for it.
Deborah, thanks, Kevin. Thanks, Kevin. Deborah says for this, for the psychology info, it would be good to include details of, you know, the actual referral route, either whether that's GP or hospital consultant. I think that's really important. Catherine, have you got a question? Because your hand up.
Yes, thank you so much. And thank you, Lynette. It was wonderful to hear you and see all of this. I'm in the field myself, and I understand a lot of it. My question is, you know, I know about the mind-body connection, and that's where I run into a little trouble with the specialists. They disagree. One of the things that I've developed is tremendous pulling and tension in the trapezoids and the neck to the occipital muscle at the base of the head. And one of them said to me, it's anxiety. And then another doctor said, no, it's part of the vestibular migraine condition. It's like all connected. I do a lot of meditation. I can't really exercise. It causes flare-ups for me. So I'm just trying to be stable and quiet. I do 1,000-piece puzzles. I listen to beautiful music. I burn incense. I do anything to help myself, you know. But I wanted to know, in your experience, if you've heard that that's part of the vestibular migraine and the anxiety condition.
I couldn't answer specifically about kind of the migraine and the condition itself, but what I guess kind of the perspective that we would always take is that stress doesn't help, does it? So I think that's the key, is that, we'd never say that kind of, stressors cause a particular kind of tension or whatever, but it's just understanding that kind of, if you're holding yourself in a certain way because you're stressed, and that's not going to be helping you. So I think it's kind of understanding that, yes, if you're experiencing anxiety, then you're going to be experiencing kind of a fight-flight situation, aren't you, where your heart's racing, you're sweating, you're feeling uncomfortable. So all that kind of physiological change is happening for you. So it's kind of recognizing that if you can bring that down and kind of help yourself to release those muscle tensions. So for example, we do a progressive muscular relaxation technique with people where you squeeze and release different parts of the body in turn, and it helps you to relax. So it's kind of appreciating that actually, if you can kind of eliminate the stress and the anxiety part of it by doing relaxation, then does that make a difference? And does that help you? And I think that's the key, isn't it? Because it's kind of taking that element out. It's reducing the anxiety and stress as being a part of it. And if we can eliminate that, then you can see what you're left with then, can't you, when that's taken away? So I think, yeah, it is difficult. It is difficult when, people will say things like that to you, or that, your stress has caused something, or it's tricky.
It's a hard one. It's a hard one, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a tricky thing. But I would always take it from the point of view that stress is not helpful, and it's not, it's going to be adding on rather than causing anything or whatever.
Yeah.
Thank you. Susie just says, she's found a great counsellor who works on Zoom with people with chronic illnesses, and she's been a great help, and has something and has gently challenged me to feel less guilty about things that I can't do during a flare-up. And I think that's a really good point, isn't it? It's about that guilt trip that we all put ourselves on, which is what you talked about. Yeah. We really do put ourselves on a guilt trip, and every single one of us has probably gone through that or is going through that, and that is the hardest part, is that change of realizing who you were, and you still want to be that person and still be able to do those things. And when you can't, you beat yourself up about it. You really do. And it's accepting. Is accepting the right word, Lynette?
Okay. I like adjustment, but yeah.
Adjusting. Okay. adjusting that things
soften.
Yeah. So things are going to be slightly different.
Yeah.
That's the hardest part. I think that's the hardest part.
Yes, it is. It absolutely is the hardest thing. The hardest thing, because you want to be you. It's so hard. It's the hardest thing, but it's all about expectations. Soften those a bit, and you might find that you can do it.
There's just a few more, no more questions, I don't think, because we are rapidly running out of time, and I know people want to go and watch the funeral as well. Deborah just says that she finds Tai Chi for dizziness really helpful on a Sunday morning, and that Lynette was just one of the guests that we had on, I think, the last meeting we had, so that's great. And Lena says, I have one of my cats as my anxiety relief. Perfect, I think, isn't it? Kevin, thank you so much, Lynette.
Yeah, Lynette, that was absolutely brilliant. And I'm sure that a lot of good's going to come from this going forwards. And as I say, all the information will be on the website in a couple of days. Just very, very, very quickly, the support group is getting traction. We are making a difference. We've got Professor Ray's department, again in Leicestershire, is supporting a medical student to do some work on how patient-led support groups impact on patient care. So the student will be looking for as many members as possible to take part in a survey to give your views, thoughts, opinions on how it's helped so far, what else you would like to see. The great thing about that is it's feeding back into the NHS. Where my view is not just balance conditions, but many other health conditions, patient support groups could make such a difference. You know, and the clinicians are all brilliant, doctors great, but they focus on fixing us in their certain way. You know, the way a carpenter always uses a saw, a screwdriver, or hammer and nails. I think support groups offer that other dimension, which is, I don't know about you guys, really important about how to live your life, how to get quality of life. So enough from me. It's brilliant, and apologies, it's shorter than usual. I assure you the next meeting, do make a note, Saturday the 19th of June, which apparently is 2 days before we get our final freedom, according to the government. But remember, especially new members, Balance Buddies, contact us, talk to us. All those that haven't, do get in touch about joining the member-to-member network, so you can opt in and talk to some amazing people. You phone them, email them. If you live near enough now, you'll be able to meet up. I assure you, there's nothing better than talking to others that totally get you. Been there, done it, they're living it. And some people who've had quite rare conditions have been over the moon. People that share those. So don't be alone, use the support group. And again, another fantastic meeting. So thanks for everyone making the effort to be here. Thanks, RuPaul, for bringing your BBC professionalism. You know we need it. But thank you, everyone. And especially Lynette for your time. We'll
absolutely.
We'll see you again.
Lots of love for Lynette on chat as well. So thank you so much to everyone for all the nice comments, and thank you, Lynette. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you. No,
thank you for your time.
You're a really nice group. Thank you for being so lovely.
I'll take care, and we will see you in June. Thanks very much.
Look after yourselves, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.